Today's sermon is going to be interactive. You all have to talk back at me. Are you ready? Okay. Good. Thank you. I put plants in the congregation. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be... you know your scriptures. Good job. This verse comes from the Sermon on the Mount. Scholars are pretty sure that this sermon was all Jesus, nobody else. And we know this because in our Bibles, it's all red letters. Remember, Jesse was talking about this last week. Red letters means Jesus said this. Well, when I was doing my research on this passage, I discovered two things. Number one, every denomination out there has their own unique take on the interpretation of this sermon. And number two, because we know that this came from Jesus, we know that it's very, very important. The Sermon on the Mount represents the core values of Christianity, no matter what denomination or what faith system you belong to. It is the core values. It is the absolute foundation of what it means to live as a follower of Christ. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we take these Beatitudes at face value. Now, you would think that I had just simplified the process, but no. I just complicated life. Woohoo! Especially when we deal with verse 4, which happens to be the topic of our sermon today. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be... I think you're really into that. Let's try again. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Thank you. That's what I want to hear. America has become a mourning avoidant society. Say that 10 times fast. Mourning avoidant society. Mourning avoidant. What that means is we've become really uncomfortable with people expressing grief and sadness. And what we want to do is we get busy. We distract ourselves from our pain, and that's all we want to do. But as many of you know, especially those of you who have gone through my grief group, you know that grief, you can't bury it. You cannot bury grief. It is going to pop back up and demand to be heard. Jesus knew this. Being fully man, he knew our nature. He knew that unmourned grief could tear a person apart and destroy families and communities. So I think that is why he addressed it in the Sermon on the Mount. Our core values as Christians should include comforting the mourning. So the questions I will answer today in this sermon is, how? How specifically do we comfort those who mourn, and why? Why is this important to do as Christians in our community? Now, but first, a thank you to the sponsors for this sermon. Last summer, you all sent me to the Center for Loss and Life Transition, which is run by Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He is an expert on the many patterns of grief and mourning. He's authored over 28 books on every kind of grief that's out there. My seminar was on support group facilitator training, and I learned so much. I thought my head was just going to explode. I bought a stack of books, and I met and networked with people from all over America and Canada. And I came back fired up and ready to run better bereavement groups for my ministry, Journeys of the Heart. Now, this soundbite was brought to you by the First Christian Church Outreach Committee. Now you know where a small chunk of your mission dollars was spent and how the ministry of the church and our community and our region is going to benefit from this training. Now, back to our regularly scheduled sermon. How do we comfort the mourning? How do we do that? Before I tell you how to do that, let me tell you about the kinds of folks you are going to meet when you are mourning. Dr. Wolfelt calls this the rule of three. Understand that 99% of the people you meet have really, really, really good intentions about comforting people who are sad. It's just that only a very, very small percentage know what to do. So, let's meet someone I call Charlene, the Christian codependent. Charlene has the best intentions. She heard about the death in your family, and she wants to come and fix you up really fast. It's been 2 weeks since the funeral, and she is wanting you to move along in your grief. Because, and this is her favorite little verse to quote, "The joy of the Lord is our strength." A conversation with her goes something like this. "Oh, you poor, 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 poor thing. I know exactly how you feel. Now don't you fret a bit. Your loved one is in a better place. Why, God himself, he just needed another angel up in heaven, and that is why he just claimed your loved one. Okay, besides, you look so good. You look amazing. In a couple of months, you'll just be right back out there, and you'll find another life partner. It's going to be fine. You can snag another one in no time." What? Why are you crying? What? No. Remember what it said in Revelations? Jesus came to wipe our every tear. Here, have a tissue. No, better yet, have a box. You know what's great about these things? You can hide behind them when you're out in public. Don't want anyone seeing you not holding up. What kind of witness would that be? Put on a brave front and you'll be better in no time. Oh, look at the time. Oh, gotta go. Call me. Ever been run over by someone like that after you've lost a loved one? Yeah. Good intentions, really good intentions, but do you feel better after they've been with you? No. Oh, I felt like I was run over by a Mack truck. Okay, so let's be fair, let's be objective. In all fairness, what did Charlene do right? She showed up. She showed up. Okay, motivated out of a sense of Christian compassion, but she wanted to cheer you up. She sympathized. She knew that we all feel sad when someone we love dies, but what did she do wrong? Yes, Joe.
Dismissive of feelings.
Dismissive of feelings, yes. Stephen ministers, give it to me, come on, bring it. What'd she do wrong? She tried to fix it. All right, you just eradicated one whole paragraph out of my sermon because you got right to the crux of it. And this is why I love Stephen ministers, and this is why they help me with bereavement groups. Wow, thank you, Barbara. All right, slide. You can't fix feelings. You can only bear witness to them. Okay? You can't fix a feeling. You can only bear witness to them. Charlene sympathized, but she did not empathize. She tried to speed up the sadness and mourning process. Now, Dr. Wolfeld taught me this, and I want you all to take this to heart, tattoo it on your foreheads, make sure it's there forever and ever. Amen. When you are grieving, there are no rewards for speed. Repeat after me. There are for speed. Thank you. Grief takes time. Mourning is normal and healthy. So the next type of person you are going to encounter when you are grieving are the folks I call Fred and Frida, the food or fix the leaky faucet friends. No offense, Fred Stolp, I was not thinking of you when I had this in my head. All right, Frida and Fred are doers. They are very uncomfortable around emotions. Tears terrify and paralyze them. So rather than bear witness to a loved one's pain, they get busy. Frida cooks enough food for an army, and she shows up armed with casseroles, cakes, and a mop bucket. She is a dependable but silent friend. Now, the male version of this friend is Fred. Fred's going to ring the doorbell, he's going to nod his head, and he is going to get to work. Every leaky faucet in your house is fixed. The yard is mowed and the car is washed and waxed. Should you start to shed a tear in their presence, they will only clean faster, which I have seen, or they will excuse themselves to go do another task because they are so uncomfortable around feelings. Okay, in all fairness, let's be objective. What did Fred and Frida do right? They showed up, which is a wonderful witness, and that's a good thing to do. What else did they do right?
Their form of help.
Very good. They do things for you in your acute grief state that you can't do for yourself. Acute grief happens 6 weeks from the point of the loss of your loved one, usually about 6 weeks afterward. We call that the acute grief state. And that is a state of high disorganization and numbness. And so when this is going on, it's nice to have those people there bringing that dependable, the things you can't do for yourself because you're so overwhelmed, like cooking and driving and doing things like that. They never tell you what to feel or offer a platitude, but what could they have done better? Listen. Engage with the feelings of their friends or their loved ones. Afraid to say the wrong thing, they don't say anything at all, nor do they take the time to listen. Which leads me to the final example of the rule of 3. Meet Lisa and Lloyd, the listeners. Lisa and Lloyd, upon hearing the news of the death of your loved one, they have come over immediately. They bring food, and they sit down with you, and they listen. Your tears are welcomed. Your anger is welcomed. Your numbness is accepted. Your feelings, they are validated not with psychobabble or Christian platitudes, but with empathy. Rather than saying, I know exactly how you feel, they say, tell me how you are feeling. You're the teacher. This is your grief. I am here to be with you. In chaplain ministry, we call this holding space. It is marked by gentleness and what I call devout listening. No problem solving, no rushing, no platitudes, no mopping floors, just a beautiful, wonderful acceptance. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. All right. Earlier in the sermon, I said I would answer why we need to do this as Christians, and beyond the obvious of Jesus telling us that we should. So let's dig a little deeper. Folks, this summer, a really great animated movie came out called Inside Out. How many of you have seen that? Raise your hands. Okay, if you haven't seen it, you can come to Faith and Films. We'll be showing it and getting into a big, wonderful theological discussion about it. But if you want to prep yourself, go rent it today. It is a wonderful story. Don't want to spoil it too much, but I need it to illustrate the better part of this sermon. So, this movie, it's the story about the feeling center in our brains. And in the movie, these feelings are depicted as 5 little characters who are the main feelings we all have: joy, fear, disgust, anger, and sadness. As the story unfolds, the focus is on a little girl who has to move from the Midwest to San Francisco. Now, trust me, huge relocations, these cause a lot of emotions and grief. Yeah, we went through that 8 years ago when we uprooted our family from Virginia and came out here. Kids have issues with that. So, we see the movie through the eyes of the characters who are the feelings in her head, and they are experiencing this move. Now, normally this girl's primary feeling is always joy. So the feeling joy is in charge. She works harder than any other emotion to make sure that the little girl responds to life with happiness. Now, Joy is always trying to keep Sad away from the control panel. And I love the character Sad. She's just all blue, and she's got glasses, and she talks like this. And Joy is always just, oh, heaven forbid the little girl feels sad. Well, the reason for this is feelings imprint on our memories, and they get stored in our brain. And the memories you have the most of and that you recall often, these are the ones that invoke the greatest feelings. And these become what psychologists call core memories. Core memories. So this movie perfectly illustrated what happens when we listen to someone who is mourning. So as the story gets near the end, the little girl is having the worst day of her life, but something wonderful happens. Her worst day turns into her best day because the little girl was grieving and her family comforted her. And what happens? It produced a mixed feeling. A sphere that represented deep sorrow, but also connection and hope and joy. And in that precious moment, we see her reinvesting in her life. And it's a new life. It's not the life that she had back in Wisconsin. It's the new life in San Francisco. And not because she was told, you ought to feel this way, your dad is working hard to provide a living for you, you shouldn't be feeling sad. No, that's not what they did. What they did is that they accepted her feelings. And what that did for her was it validated and it normalized. That's what acceptance does. So folks, when sad, a very normal emotion that we all have, when sad is welcomed into our life and not shunned away, authentic bonding happens. In chaplain speak, we call that integration. Integration. And folks, that bond is so strong. It is so strong. That bond is what keeps families together. That bond is what makes churches stronger and what changes our world and our communities. It fulfills the beatitude of Jesus. And I think, this is my take on it, it's because it models the love God has for us. Acceptance and authenticity. This is what happens in bereavement group. It is deep, and it is authentic, and it is life-affirming. This is what happens when any of you listen devoutly to a friend or a family member who is grieving. A precious and a fully integrated feeling is produced. And when that happens, people are able to reinvest and reconcile their grief. I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely live for those moments. I live for them. I have seen them hundreds and hundreds of times in my ministry. Chaplaincy has taught me to be a spiritual midwife, and my calling and vocation is to create spaces of sanctuary where people can find their connection to community and to God again through their exploration of their grief. I want to go back to the center for more training so that I can bring that back to this church. I want to teach you all how to recognize and honor these authentic moments and to nurture them along. I want you all to be like Lisa and Lloyd, the listeners. I want you to listen. Or as my grandma Esther taught me, God gave you 2 ears means you should listen twice as much as you talk. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now go.